ततश्च समये तस्माद् हनुमानिति नाम भाक् ततश्च समये तस्माद् हनुमानिति नाम भाक् शम्भुर्जज्ञे कपितनुः महाबलपराक्रमः शम्भुर्जज्ञे कपितनुः हनुमानिति नाम भाक् जय हनुमान ज्ञान गुण सागर जय कपीस दिगि लोक उजागर रामदूत अतुलित बलधामा अंजनी पुत्र पवन सुत नामा महावीर विक्रम बजरंगी कुमति निवार सुमति के संगी कंचन भरण विराज सुबेसा कानन कुंडल कुंचित केश हाथ वज्र और त्वचा विराज कांधे मुंज जनेऊ साज शंकर सुवन केसरी नंदन तेज प्रताप जगवंदन शंकर सुवन केसरी नंदन शंकरांशुडै चदुवुलन्नि शंकरांशुडै चदुवुलन्नि తెలిసి శంకరాంశుడై సదయుడాశోగ సంభవుడు మ్రోక కదలుతం ముని పల్క జయసితి చదువులన్నీ తెలిసి శంకరాంశుడై సదయుడాశోగ సంభవుడు మ్రోక కదలుతం ముని పల్క జయసితి విగాకను త్యాగరాజు అడిన మాటలాడమోడిగలదే రామయ్య మాటలాడమోడిగలదే రామయ్య Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Welcome to the fourth installment of Shankaram Vashankaram. Today we'll be exploring the incarnation of Lord Shankara as Lord Hanuman in the form of a Vanara, and mainly as seen through the kritis of Thyaagaraja Swaami. We'll be exploring the Shankaramsha Hanuman. We started off with a Puranic reference where Nandi himself testifies that Shambhu, or his Lord Shankara, is the one who incarnated in the form of a monkey of great strength and valor named Hanuman. Hanumaniti nama bhak Shambhur jagne kapitanuhu. And the reason for this incarnation, he says, is Pritya Ramasya Parameshwaraha. It was because Parameshwara had such affection, such love for Rama that he incarnated in the form of Hanuman. And this, he has used many synonyms to explain this. He says Rudramsha, Haramshaja, Mahadevamshaja, Shivavataram, Rudravataro, and so on to describe Hanuman. And apart from the Shiva Puranam, the Skanda Puranam also glorifies Hanuman as Rudravatara. In the Brihaddharma Purana, there is a rarer story where Lord Hanuman gives darshana to a goddess named Chandika in the form of Lord Rudra, in his Vishwarupa form. And in the Kritivasi Ramayana, towards the end, there is even an episode where Sita herself sees Hanuman as Lord Shiva. And apart from these comparatively obscure references, we see Hanuman mentioned as an incarnation of Shankara in perhaps the most popular stotram dedicated to Lord Hanuman, written by the Awadhi saint poet Tulsidas, which is the Hanuman Chalisa. He begins by saying victory to Hanuman, Jai Hanuman, Jnana Gunasagar, and he goes on to say Sankar Suvan, he who is an offshoot of Lord Shankara. And Thyaagaraja Swaami seems to have picked up this particular epithet for him because of his immense love for the title Shankara. This is why this whole series is titled Shankaram Vashankaram, because Thyagaraja Swaami had an immense love in addressing Lord Shiva as Shankara. And in this kriti that I just sang in Ragam Charukeshi, he says Chaduvulanni telisi Shankaramshudai sadayudashuga sambhavudu mrokka kadalu tammuni palka jesiti vigakanu. He recollects Hanuman's first encounter with Lord Rama in the Aranyakanda, where Hanuman arrives before Rama and Lakshmana, introduces himself, and when Rama hears those first few introductory dialogues itself, he's so impressed with Hanuman's scholarliness, his aptitude, and how well versed he is. And he talks to Lakshmana and says, "Introduce us, but be careful because this man seems to be extraordinarily brilliant." And Thyaagaraja Swaami takes a different perspective on this episode and says, despite knowing that Hanuman is Shankaramsha, Shankaramshudai, despite knowing that he's so well versed, when he is the son of the Vayuputra, why did you make your brother introduce you instead? You could have directly spoken to Hanuman, but instead you made Lakshmana mediate and introduce you. If such is the state of the great Hanuman, then it's definitely far-fetched for you to speak with this poor Thyagaraja alone. Thyagaraja adina matalada modi galade Ramaya, says Thyagaraja Swaami. And apart from such references to Hanuman and other kritis of Rama, there are a few kritis where Thyagaraja Swaami exclusively talks about Lord Hanuman itself. And we're going to look into a few of those kritis today. We'll start off with Pahi Ramaduta Jagath Praana Kumaara. In this kriti, he gives us a detailed account of Lord Anjaneya and his miraculous achievements. On Hanuman's mission to Lanka, he not only reassures Devi Sita about her rescue, but also goes as a messenger to negotiate peace with Ravana. So to this astute and smart Ramaduta, Thyagaraja Swami says Pahi Ramaduta. And I want to make a mention of the very creative ways in which he brings out the fact that Hanuman is Vayuputra, or son of the wind god. He starts by saying Pahi Ramaduta Jagat Prana Kumaara. I salute the son of the wind god who is the messenger of Lord Rama. What is the connection between those two phrases? To me it seems like, just as the wind carries our messages or transmits sounds, you are the son of the wind god who carried the message of Lord Rama to Lanka, to Devi Sita. Further in the same kriti, he goes on to say Pavana Tulya Vega, the one with wind-like speed. Kalimalabhra Gandhavaha, the filth of this Kali Yuga is swirling around us mortals like big dark clouds. And to those clouds of sin, you act like the gust of wind that blows them away. So the meaning is that you are the one who redeems us from the evils of this Kali Yuga. And Gandhavaha means carrier of fragrances. Just as the wind transports smells and fragrances, you are the son of the wind god who carries the sweet scent of the Ramanama to Devi Sita and Lanka. So apart from these poetic addressals, let's just come down to the basic meaning of Vayuputra. Why is it so important to address him as not just Prana Kumara but Jagat Prana Kumara? To me it feels like Jagat Prana, or the life of the world, has been protected or safeguarded by Hanuman, because right from the time that he associated himself with Sugriva and saved him from his brother Vali who was chasing him, to the time that he saved Devi Sita who was about to give up her life in Ashokavana, or when Lakshmana was felled in war, Hanuman was the one who brought the Sanjeevani to resurrect him. And he also saved Bharata's life, who was about to give up his life when Rama didn't show up on time. And if any of these people had given up their lives, high chances that Rama himself would have lost the will to live. So by protecting the lives of all these people, he is the one who has protected the whole world. He protected the whole Jagat by saving so many people's lives, so he is Jagat Prana Kumara. Taking a slightly more philosophical angle, he is called the son of Vayu, Vayuputra. We say you are the putra of so-and-so person when the person has given birth to you. The ones who have given life to you, you are their putra. By that logic, since Vayu or air is giving all of us life at every moment by being that living breath in each one of us, all of us can be thought of as Vayuputras. So if, in that sense, why is Hanuman particularly addressed as Vayuputra? Because he represents the ideal of a Vayuputra, because all of us are Vayuputras, and within each one of us there is a monkey called our heart or our mind that leaps from desire to desire, from aspiration to aspiration, always running behind something, never satisfied. That's why Thyagaraja Swami says, Manasa Vanachara. The monkey heart always roams behind different pursuits. But to show that such a monkey can also be controlled is why Hanuman is in the form of a monkey, because if we emulate the ideals that he symbolizes, we can also unlock the godliness within us and take ourselves closer to that Ramachandra Murti. And Thyagaraja Swami himself gives us this meaning in a different kriti, very popular one. He says, Manasa Vanachara Vara Sancharamu Nilipi. This heart is like a big monkey. So those who have stopped this wandering monkey mind, those who have brought it under their control, have very well realized the divine Murti, that they have seen the Lord Rama, Atma Rama, or the Lord within them. He says, Thyagaraja Swami says, Manasa Vanachara Vara Sancharamu Nilipi Murti Baguga Podagane Endaro Mahaanubhaavulu Manasa Vanachara Vara Sancharamu Nilipi Murti Baguga Podagane Endaro Mahaanubhaavulu Andarike Vandanamu Endaro Mahaanubhaavulu. This very popular Kirtanam, he lists Hanuman also as one of these Mahans that he's talking about here. And he says, these Mahans are those people who have unlocked the godliness within them by bringing their wandering mind or their hearts to a standstill, just like the monkey lord Hanuman did. Moving on, we come to Kaluguna Padaniraja Seva, where he addresses Hanuman and talks to him saying, I yearn for the privilege of serving Lord Rama's lotus feet the way that you do, O Hanuman, who is always right next to the Lord at any time. He describes this as Palumaru Juchuchu Brahmanandudai Parage, the divine ecstasy of beholding Lord Rama all the time by being at his beck and call. That is the great privilege that Thyagaraja Swami also wants. And in the Charanam, he paints us a beautiful word picture of how Hanuman stays by Lord Rama starting right from the time he wakes up at daybreak. Thyagaraja Swami says, Vekuva Jamuna, at sunrise, Ni Karamuna Nidi, Shrikantudu Amritasnanamu Jesi. Shrikanta, Lord Rama, holds your hand as he has his nectarine morning bath or Abhisheka. And further, Pakamulanu Shri Rangeshuniki Arpanamu Jesi, first offering the prasada to Lord Ranganatha, who is the Kuladaivam or the hereditary deity for the Ikshvaku dynasty. Rama then proceeds to have food himself, and that too, Thyagaraja Swami specifies, Ta Sita Karamulache Bhujinchi. Rama himself only eats the food prepared by the loving hands of his beloved Sita. And as he does so, Ninu Satvika Purana Pathana Seyamane. He instructs you, O Hanuman, to read out the Satvika Puranas to him during those early morning hours. So this beautiful scene is given to us by Thyagaraja Swami, a scene that to my knowledge is not even in the Valmiki Ramayana. It is an individual experience of Thyagaraja Swami's divine bhakti. And so he talks about the greatness of Hanuman's bhakti. And to conclude today's presentation, we look at one more kriti in the Ragam Surati, very popular one, Geethaarthamu Sangeethaanandamu, where Thyagaraja Swami speaks to that very heart, which he just called a monkey, as we saw a while back. He says, O Manasa, O heart, behold over here the Geethaarthamu and Sangeethaanandamu. Geethaarthamu meaning the true meaning of the Bhagavat Gita, and Sangeethaanandamu means the bliss of good music. What does he mean by here? Where are these found? Who knows the meaning of the Gita and the bliss of Sangeeta? Thyagaraja Swami says, to answer this, Vatatmajuniki Bhagadalusura. The son of Vayu knows both these things very well. Hanuman knows both of these, Geethaarthamu and Sangeethaanandamu, well. How does he make such a statement? What does Hanuman have to do with music? And even more perplexingly, Hanuman prominently features in the Ramayana during the Ramavatara. What could he possibly have to do with Krishna's Bhagavad Gita? We need to understand this a little bit more in depth, get some context to understand this statement of Thyagaraja Swami. We'll first look at the first phrase, Geethaarthamu. In the very first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, in the Arjuna Vishada Yogam, Sanjaya observes the scenes of the battlefield and recounts it to Dhritarashtra. He says, Atha vyavasthitan drishtva dhartarashtran kapidhvaja. O Dhritarashtra, Arjuna observed the scene of the battlefield, and instead of calling him directly as Arjuna, Sanjaya in the very beginning calls attention to Hanuman stationed on the top of Arjuna's flag. He says Kapidhvaja, the one who has a monkey on his banner or his flag as an emblem. There's a backstory behind how this happens, but the crux of it is that Hanuman is blessing Arjuna by being on his chariot flag so that he attains victory in this great war. And when Bhagavan Sri Krishna gives the sermon of the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna hears it, and we don't know if he understood it in its entirety, in its essence, but Hanuman, who hears it from Arjuna's flag, seems to have completely understood its inner meanings, because not only has he heard it directly from Krishna, but there also exists a commentary on the Gita written by Hanuman. Today, popularly, we refer to the Bhashyams or the commentaries of Adi Shankara Bhagavad Pada or of Ramanujacharya or other great scholars like this. But there is also a commentary called the Paishacha Bhashyam, written from the Advaitic perspective, written, so believed, by Hanuman himself. So Thyagaraja, because of this maybe, he addresses Hanuman as the knower of the Geethaartha, the meanings, the inner meanings of the Gita. Coming to the second phrase, he says, Sangeethaanandamu. Throughout today's exploration, we've been seeing how Shankara and Hanuman have been related and experienced by Thyaagaraja Swaami. When it comes to Lord Shiva, he is a great musician because Thyaagaraja Swaami describes him as Veena Vadana Loludau, he who revels in the music of the Veena. And when it comes to Anjaneya, there is a story of him crushing the egos of the great Vainikas Narada and Tumburu by outshining them both in a contest of Veena playing. And if you don't want to just believe lore at face value, there is even a sculpture of Lord Hanuman holding the Veena. So it's a very unique representation of Lord Hanuman looking at his beloved Devi Sita and Lord Rama and singing their praises in front of them. So we see that he was also a musician. And when it comes to Layam, or the rhythmic aspect, we know that Shiva holds the two-faced drum and is called the Lord of Layam. And he dances the Tandavam to the percussive accompaniment, to the rhythm of Nandi's Mridangam. Similarly, when we look at Anjaneya, in a temple in the town called Varagur, very close to Tiruvayyaru, Anjaneya is seen as Talam Kotti Anjaneya, which means that he's putting Talam to music. So we see that he also has a great affinity for Layam or rhythm. So because of this, we get enough evidences to prove that he also fully realized the Sangeethaanandamu, the bliss of music. So with this, we'll conclude today's presentation with this beautiful Kriti in the Ragam Surati, paying our humblest namaskarams to Hanuman and Thyaagaraja Swaami and their beloved Rama. Do join me again next week as we conclude this 5-part series by tying up the loose ends of the great intimacy shared by Thyaagaraja Swaami with both Lord Rama and Lord Shiva. So do join me for that concluding installment, and we'll conclude today's episode with this beautiful Surati Ragam Kriti. Sitapati Charanabjamulidu Kunna Sitapati Charanabjamulidu Kunna Patatmajuniki Bhagatelu Sura Vatatmajuniki Bhagatelu Sura Geethaarthamu Sangeethaanandamu Etavuna Judara O Manasa Geethaarthamu Sangeethaanandamu